Hello there. Welcome in. Glad to have you, whether you're listening on Extra Sports 1300, 740 KVOR, or you're listening on the streaming apps of those two fine radio stations, which you can find wherever digital streaming apps are downloaded for free because they are free to download and free to use, and they are sponsored by Diversus Health, Mental Health, and Well-Being for All. Not a veritable cornucopia of sports topics today because we got one thing on our minds, and that is the U.S. and Australia. We are into stoppage time. Got about 2-3 minutes. We just had a referee cramp up, so probably some more time added. There is 6 additional minutes, and we've hit 95. So I think we're 2, maybe 3 minutes away from the U.S. potentially clinching their group. If they are at least able to hang on to this 2-0 lead, they will get out of the group stage. We know that. More changes coming here for the U.S. Gio Reyna is going to be one of them. This result holds, and Australia has been shut out the entirety of this contest. So if it would be a miracle for them to get 2. But what we're looking at here is if the U.S. win, and then we shift our attention to Paraguay and Turkey tonight, and if Paraguay is able to get a result, the U.S. will win the group. So that's what we're looking at here. Haji Wright, the other substitute here for the United States. Wright was actually the star the last time the U.S. played Australia. That match, coincidentally, was in Denver. So Wright and Reyna on. We are into the 97th minute. We're supposed to play 96, but we've had a lot of injuries, a lot of stoppages. Australia trying to muck things up here late in the match, as the U.S. clearing one out towards midfield, just waiting for that final whistle. Now they might have something here as they look to add a third, and it's Wright, the substitute on the ball. Don't want to get in trouble for doing play-by-play, but, without the hydration breaks, this match would have ended before I went on the air. So let me bring you some of the contact information. It is rare that we get this opportunity to discuss a sporting event that is going on live as this show is going on, and immediately react afterwards as well. So if you want to call or text into the show, the number is the same, 719-247-1313. If you are watching the show anywhere you scroll, you could just drop a comment right there on the stream. But the U.S. right now up 2-0, waning moments of their second group stage match against Australia. And I think both numbers are significant. I think once this thing is over, if the U.S. can hang on and keep a clean sheet, I think that's the more significant number. Because in this second half, they have been under a lot of duress. There's been a lot of nervy moments. You expected the desperation level to go up from Australia. They made some tactical substitutions to bring in more attacking talent, and that will do it. The U.S. has hung on for a 2-0 win over Australia. They are in the knockout round. If Paraguay gets a result tonight against Turkey, the U.S. will win the group. And we'll figure out what's on the line with the Turkey match coming up when the time comes. But the U.S. hang on for the 2-0 win. And again, I think the clean sheet is more significant. The more questions that I had about this team coming in was preventing goals rather than scoring them. You knew the quality of Christian Pulisic, who we'll talk about, did not play today, was unavailable. We'll talk about what Pochettino decided to do in his absence, but with Balogun and Pulisic and Dest and McKennie, I thought this U.S. team would be able to find a way to score goals. But could they keep other teams off the board, especially with what Australia was able to do against Turkey? And you're going to have those moments, right? You're going to have moments in a match when a team is desperate, when they bring on some more attacking players. You're going to be under pressure. You're not going to look cool, calm, and collected all the time. And I thought the U.S. did a phenomenal job of weathering any storms that would come their way in that second half. And to get their first clean sheet since what, September? Against Japan? Is that the last time the U.S. has gotten a clean sheet? I think that's significant because if we're going to talk about this, and I've seen so much of it on my timeline today, this is the best U.S. soccer team we've ever had, or they've looked the best that I've ever seen. And I certainly said it after the Paraguay match that I've never seen a U.S. team as dynamic and dominant as the one I saw in the first 45 against Paraguay. But this team's going to have some balance. They're going to have to be able to keep teams off the scoreboard, and they were able to do that today against Australia, getting the 2-0 win. But once again, the dynamism of this U.S. team was on full display. Christian Pulisic, unavailable because of the injury. We'll talk more about the ramifications of that moving forward, but we wonder where Pochettino was going to go. He ends up putting Pepe in the lineup and moving Balogun out to the left-hand side. And that left-hand side, coincidentally, the side that Pulisic operated in so well against Paraguay, was undefendable at times. That left-hand side looked just as dangerous for the U.S. as it did in its previous match. And that was in large part due to Flo Balogun. And he ends up setting up the first goal that is going to go down as an own goal, but it's one of those own goals that you give credit to the attacking team because they created that own goal. But that was Balogun on the left-hand side. So you have to say that the change that Pochettino made, the decision he made, there was a lot of talk about Gio Reyna maybe getting a spot. He got a cameo at the end of this one. Pochettino pushes the right buttons, puts Balogun out on the left-hand side, and his star turn continues. Tom Rinaldi talked about this in the pregame. So apparently, the reason why Balogun was born in the United States is because his mother wasn't allowed to fly out of New York. There was a flight attendant that denied her. I'll get the story straight, but it wasn't by design that Flo Balogun was going to be born in the United States. From Tom Rinaldi's reporting, the Balogun family had every intention of Flo being born in England. And he wasn't. He was born in the United States. And a couple of years ago made the decision, with much prodding from U.S. soccer fans, to play for the United States. And what amazing decision that was for the United States, for Flo Balogun to decide he's going to represent the U.S. because he's been, and there's been a long list of guys who have been incredibly impactful. I want to talk about Alex Freeman's game today. But through two matches, there aren't many guys who have been more impactful than Flo Balogun. Gets the brace against Paraguay, sets up the own goal to open the scoring today. Man, he been a gift to U.S. soccer. But it wasn't just him. You know, if we're going to talk about this team being the best American team we've ever seen, it wasn't just going to be Flo Balogun. And it wasn't. Freeman was outstanding today. He got the second goal. I thought Sergino Dest was good. The right-hand side wasn't quite as good as the left for the United States, but Dest had his moments. And again, I go back to the way that this team defended. It wasn't clinical at all times. It wasn't the prettiest defending at all times. But at the end of the day, there is a big fat goose egg on Australia's side of the board. I think that is massive for the U.S. They got to clean some things up, certainly, but that's what a group stage is for. And now, if by chance they don't need the Turkey A match to win the group, and that will depend on how tonight goes, could we see a more of a focus towards the defensive end of the field and see if they can get further rounded into form on that side of things before they get into the knockout round? But the first 45 minutes of this match, there was so much talk about Australia, how big, how physical. We think back to the last time these two teams met, again in Denver. It got very chippy, very physical. You knew Australia was going to do that. And you watched, and there were way more Australia jerseys back than you saw against Paraguay. There was far less space to operate in, except on that left-hand side. And that opened everything up. And then they were able to get balls into the box and create some chaos. So for the U.S. to be able to still find those seams, still find that space, even though there's much less of it than there was against Paraguay, it was wide open, right? Because Balogun drew the two center backs, and then you had Pulisic, who was unguardable on the left-hand side. Dest was terrific on the right. Weston McKennie running into wide open spaces. It wasn't that way today against Australia, as expected. But this U.S. team, with their dynamism, with their on-ball ability, was still able to create some space and create some chaos, leading to that first goal. And even both of their goals today, I think you could say, were born out of a bit of chaos, right? The second one was a shot that was blocked from just outside the 18, went straight up in the air. Freeman kept onside by an Australian defender. That was absolutely the right call by VAR. And he was able to head it into the back of the net. It wasn't as pretty. I think that's kind of the way, your big takeaway from this one. It was not as pretty as the 4-1 opening win against Paraguay. But how many times do we talk about, regardless of the sport, if you're going to win a title, if you're going to go deep in the playoffs, or in this case, if you're going to go deep into the knockout round in this World Cup, you got to be able to win in different ways. You can't overwhelm, and this is going to be even more true as this tournament goes on. The U.S. will not be able to overwhelm teams with their talent. And when you can't do that, can you manufacture goals? And I thought the U.S. was able to do that against a very big, strong, physical Australian defense. And I think the game plan, the lineup by Australia they really leaned into that today. A lot of people questioned some of the decisions by Australia's manager in terms of the lineup. I think the script he saw in his head was, we're going to push around this U.S. team, and we're going to be physical, and we're going to beat them up a little bit. And at a 0-0 game at the break, I'm going to bring in my goal scorers. And we're going to take advantage of heavy legs and in a bruised up, if you will, not literally, but figuratively, U.S. team and be able to score some goals. And it did not go according to plan, to the U.S.'s credit. Mauricio Pochettino now speaking with Fox. We'll see what his thoughts were on all of this. You'll hear the 2 goals. But most importantly today, I want your reaction. Got a comment in on Instagram that I will get to, 719-247-1313. The U.S. now back-to-back wins, the first time since the 30s that the United States of America has won back-to-back matches in the World Cup. And if Paraguay can do us a solid tonight, we'll wake up tomorrow with the U.S. clinching the group. Either way, they are through to the knockout round with the 2-0 win over Australia, an own goal by Australia early on in the match, and then Freeman had a header late in the, well, not that late because the hydration break adds a lot of stoppage time, but later in the first half to make it 2-0, and then it was just about defending. And the U.S. was able to do it effectively enough to not only win the match, but also keep Australia from scoring a goal. Just getting going on this edition of Drive Time Sports. Back after this. Father's Day is coming up on Sunday, which means this is your last chance to get entered to win $5,000 with our Top Pop contest. Just go to extrasports1300.com or kvor.com to enter this national contest, which is sponsored locally by Papa Murphy's Pizza. We make it, you bake it. Taking your thoughts on the U.S. moving to 2-0 in the group stage with a 2-0 win this afternoon over Australia. An own goal by the Socceroos and Freeman with the other, getting credit for the U.S. on those two goals. Your thoughts anywhere you choose to interact with the show. Case in point, got one comment on Instagram and one on the text line. Let's start on Instagram. Very Woke Indeed says, another great performance. The attacking pressure was way too much for the Aussies. Not a ton of chances, but made the most of what we had. And you'll look at some of the numbers from this one compared to the Paraguay match. The expected goals for the U.S., it was 1.88 against Paraguay, and they scored 4. Just crazy. Expected goals today down to 1.30. The shots on goal today for the U.S. were 2. They got 6 on target against Paraguay. So right there, it tells you that there just weren't as many opportunities for the U.S. In this match as there was in the opener, but we knew that. We knew that was going to be the case. I don't think, I watched this match and there are aspects of it that I'm very impressed by, maybe mildly surprised by. But the idea that the U.S. wouldn't be able to have as much space to operate, to take chances as they did against Paraguay, that's not surprising to me. But to the commenter's point, made the most of those opportunities. And I thought, again, with so much attention all week on whether Christian Pulisic would play or not, he does not. Pochettino puts Balogun out there on the left-hand side. And I saw a lot of space on that left-hand side. Consistently throughout that first half, the U.S. was breaking down Australia, and it was the key to most of the pressure they were able to put on it. It certainly led to the own goal. So you didn't see the drop-off necessarily on that left-hand side, and that's a credit to Balogun. But still, fewer shots on goal. Expected goals was down, but the U.S., I think you could say this through both matches, have maximized their opportunities. They take 6 shots on goal against Paraguay. They have 4 goals. They take, how many was it again today? 2 shots on goal, and they end up with 2 goals. Of course, one being an own goal. So that was the story of the first half, I think, was how the U.S. could still create opportunities, maybe fewer than against Paraguay, but could still create opportunities. To me, it was another 45 minutes where you would be hard-pressed to be critical of the U.S. Early on in the match, there were a couple of tense moments, but nothing came of it. And then the U.S., it was almost a carbon copy of the first 45 against Paraguay, wasn't it? Couple of early, that's not great. And then the U.S. locked in and just pinned Australia back in their own end. After the first couple of moments of the match, I think the only time where anything got even remotely close to nervy was when Australia had a couple of corner kicks. Because those set pieces were a concern coming in because Australia, because of their size, they got the one center back that's 6'6". And you're like, if Australia is going to get goals in this one, it might be off of set piece opportunities. And man, I was watching. It's hard not to watch a guy that's 6'6". He broke free on both of those corner kicks. The ball just didn't make it to him. And he got another opportunity late. And you give credit to Freeman, who's given up, I don't know, if looked like a foot on the guy and was still able to mark him out of it. But the first 45 minutes from the U.S. was, considering the opponent and the style of play and how different it would be than what Paraguay presented, equally impressive. I think I would say that. But then there's the second half, and this is where the text from Chris comes in. I think it's valid. I did not like the way the U.S. played in the second half today. However, a win is a win, and this team looks really good. And I think, not to put words in your mouth, Chris, I think you're talking about defensively. It looked, they were a little out of sorts at times. It was there are a lot of nervy moments in that second half, which made Freeman's goal at the end of the half so massive, right? And I know they kept going on and on Fox about the 2-goal lead, and we see this in hockey too. The most dangerous lead in hockey is a 2-goal lead as well. But if you're up 2-0, then you have that cushion. And even if Australia were to find the first one, I think the U.S., with the confidence that they've found, I think they would have been able to recover. Now, we'll never truly know because it never got to that point, but there's a reason. Like, I get it. 2-goal lead is a dangerous lead to have, but it's better than a 1-goal lead. And the U.S. had that cushion, but you knew Australia was going to come out in the second half. A desperate team. Again, tactical changes from Australia to bring better attacking players into the match. And the U.S. back line got tested a lot. Now, Australia only ends up with the 2 shots on goal. And neither one of them was like a grade A opportunity. Matt Freese was able to make both saves pretty easily. The first one was early in the game on the near post, and then he made one in the second half where he's diving to his left to smother the ball. So even with as chaotic as it was in that second half at times, the U.S. only allowed those 2 shots on goal. But I agree with Chris's sentiment. It was not picture perfect. It was not always under control defensively. But I think you also have to give Australia some credit. Right? If you saw the friendly between these two teams, that was anything but in Denver. Like, Australia can go toe-to-toe with this U.S. team. Absolutely. And with the tactical changes and the desperation level going up, you have to give Australia some credit for not going away and being able to test the U.S. But you look forward and you think about some of the teams that are remaining in this tournament, some of the potential matchups, and you go, they got to be more buttoned up defensively. And I agree. That's the bigger question that I have with this team is that end of the field. And they'll have a chance against Turkey to tighten that up before the knockout round. Wasn't always pretty at times, but as Chris says, a win is a win. And if Paraguay, everyone here is now a Paraguay fan. If they can knock off Turkey, then the U.S. will win the group, which is absolutely massive. Because not winning the group created a very real possibility. I mean, we're all projecting right now, right? But the people who project for a living and have a mathematical formula here, the BBC being one of them, had the U.S. on a collision course with Lionel Messi and Argentina in the quarterfinals. Gulp. That's if they were not able to win the group. Now, if Turkey pulls through and gets a win tonight, then that match against Turkey means a lot. But the U.S. to have a chance through two matches to already clinch the group is massive, and winning the group would be huge. Now, speaking of, we'll look and see what the path sets up right now for the U.S. and what it looks like, obviously subject to change. But it's not Lionel Messi in the round of 16. I can tell you that much. I will tell you what it is and continue to take your thoughts. 719-247-1313, or you can drop a comment on the live stream. The U.S. wins back-to-back matches in the World Cup for the first time since the 1930s. And if they get help from Paraguay, they will clinch the group and be well on their way. The momentum's continuing to go after that Paraguay match. I think hope is still very high with what this team can accomplish. More after this. Tomorrow night, PBR Space Cowboys, presented by the U.S. Space Force, will combine elite team bull riding with a live concert by Grammy Award-winning superstar Tim McGraw and multi-platinum country star Chris Jansen at Falcon Stadium, just right up the road from where I am standing right now. If you would like to go, I have a 4-pack of tickets to the 13th texter to text Cowboys in their name to 719-247-1313. That's also where you could share your thoughts on the U.S. doing something that hasn't been done in, I think it's fair to say, any of our lifetimes, which is winning back-to-back matches in the World Cup with a 2-0 win over Australia. They could clinch the group sitting in their hotel room or wherever it is that they're staying. And I believe that they will fly back to Irvine shortly and then be there tonight. But if Paraguay gets over on Turkey, the U.S. clinches the group. And the significance of that is huge. When you look at some of the potential matchups, the BBC has a live bracket that is updated after every result and takes into account all these crazy tiebreakers and everything. So you take this for what it is, but here's the path right now for the U.S. As it stands, those 3 magic words, they would play a Bosnia-Herzegovina team that absolutely came undone yesterday against Switzerland. They were right there, kind of hanging on by a thread. Then they pick up a red card, and Switzerland nets 3 more goals to beat them 4-1. That would be the U.S.'s matchup in the round of 32. They would then play the winner of New Zealand in the Czech Republic, Czechia. And then for the quarterfinals, it would get, I mean, you understand that. Like, you're looking at the quarterfinals and you're thinking Brazil or Spain or Morocco or Argentina. So we won't look that far ahead. But you would have matchups with Bosnia or Herzegovina and then the winner of New Zealand in the Czech Republic would be your round of 16 matchup. Let's look at where Australia is at the current moment in time, which they are obviously second in the group still after losing today. They would have to play Iran at in the round of 32, and then they would play Messi and the defending champions. So that's what I was talking about earlier. You do not want you're probably going to have to plan on going through the greatest soccer player of all time at some point if you have plans on winning this tournament. You don't want it in the round of 16. We're looking for this U.S. team to advance further than they ever have before. Lionel Messi would be a real roadblock in the round of 16. So that's what's at stake here for the U.S. And again, if Turkey wins tonight against Paraguay, which is kind of where I'm leaning here. I mean, Turkey, I know they lost to Australia. They took 30 shots. Like, they got a lot of opportunities against Australia. Didn't capitalize. Give the Socceroos credit. But just looking at the performances of Turkey and Paraguay, I think Turkey is going to win. That's my thought. And then that match between the U.S. and Turkey next week is huge. Now, there's some wiggle room in there for the U.S. I think they would not have to win outright. I think Turkey would have to beat them outright to win the group. So their path would be narrow. But the group would be in the balance in that match. But we'll see what happens with Paraguay and Turkey. But right now, the path after the group stage for the U.S. would be Bosnia-Herzegovina, followed by the winner of New Zealand and the Czech Republic, which, with all due respect to all three of those teams, again, is much better than even, and I don't want to get into that. You just know that Iran would be, that would be a complicated matchup, right? And then you would have Messi. And I think the U.S. could get by Iran, but the path that they have now is much better than if they were not to win the group. 719-24-7-1313. Taking your thoughts on the USA versus Australia. I thought the man of the match was Alex Freeman today. Obviously, he's the lone U.S. goal scorer because the first one was ruled an own goal. But it's not just that on why I thought Alex Freeman had the best performance today. And there was a moment at the very end of the first half that I thought, and I am prone to hyperbole, and I do tend to make things bigger than what they are, but I think it was a significant moment. Because we knew all along that Australia would try to be physical and believed that they could be physical with the United States. Player for player, Australia, this is not an upset, by the way. This isn't. U.S. is ranked 17th in the world, and they're playing on their home field. And Australia is 27th in the world and playing a world away. So this is not an upset, what happened today. But player for player, the U.S. is better. They're more talented. They're better coached. But one thing that Australia felt they had, and I think a lot of pundits thought that they had, was the physical advantage. They got some big boys. They got like 3 or 4 Hemsworth on that team. They got some big boys. And they were going to try to be physical. And I thought at the end of the first half, U.S. was up 2-0. There was a long pass going towards the end line. Australia player with Alex Freeman in tow running after it. And it looked like the Australian player was going to get on the ball. Would have been tough for him to, make anything happen out of it. But he was going to get the possession. And Alex Freeman just threw his shoulder into the shoulder of the Australian player and cleared him completely off the ball. That was the final moment of the first half. And that, to me, punctuated that first 45 or 50, 53, whatever it ended up being with the ungodly amount of stoppage time. It punctuated it perfectly for the United States because they already showed some of the advantages we knew they would have, even without Christian Pulisic. But the physical battle, Alex Freeman winning one of those physical battles. I don't think overall in the game the U.S. won the physicality battle, but that was a moment there where the significance in the commentators on Fox mentioned we didn't see the bench, but they mentioned the bench going nuts. And I think that's why it was such a big moment, because that was Alex Freeman saying, you're not going to push us around. We can do a lot of the pushing here. And to punctuate the end of the first 45, which was arguably as good as what it was against Paraguay, I thought that was a significant moment in the match. Australia's desperation level went up. They went they sold out, certainly in the second half, to try and get goals. They had more attacking talent on the field. but the U.S. still was able to see a clean sheet out. And then there was another moment from Alex Freeman late, again, that 6'6" center back for Australia on a late set piece. Probably wouldn't have altered the result. It was probably over by then. But again, with the clean sheet hanging in the balance, set pieces being one of the things that I was concerned with going into this match, and Alex Freeman giving up how much size is able to get that guy off of his spot and not allow him an opportunity to test Matt Freese there at the end. So I thought Alex Freeman, to me, would have been the man of the match, but there were other standouts. Balogun was brilliant once again, moving out to the left-hand side for Christian Pulisic. I thought he was tremendous. But another really good team win for the United States as they move to 2-0 in the group stage. First time, I believe it's 1930 is the exact year. That was the last time the United States won back-to-back matches in the World Cup, which perpetuates the conversation we've been having for a week now. And I'll continue to say it. My thought after the Paraguay match holds here. I don't think we've seen a team look this good to begin a World Cup. With the normal caveat that it will get more difficult from here. Absolutely. But the first 45 against Paraguay, really, I hated the goal that they gave up against Paraguay, which perpetuated my biggest concern with this team. But all in all, that was a pretty complete performance against Paraguay. I would say this was more a tale of two halves in terms of who was controlling play, who was the better team. I think Australia, I have to say, was the better team in the second half overall. But the first halves of both the Paraguay match and this Australia one, again, dominant in possession. I haven't seen a U.S. team be able to do that, to look like that. But I'm seeing a lot of people on social media talking about this being the best, and it's obviously generational. You know, it happens every 4 years, and you go back, 8 years, the U.S. isn't even in the World Cup. Right? And then you go back and you go back. We fight the urge sometimes to be a prisoner of the moment. I don't think I'm being a prisoner of the moment. It doesn't mean that this is the best U.S. team yet. I mean, we're very results-oriented. I think winning a knockout round match is the bar here if we're going to seriously consider this the best U.S. team ever. Now, we can argue right now or debate right now whether this is the most talented U.S. team. I think there are certainly early signs, if you didn't already believe it, that this is the best collection of talent that the U.S. men's national team has ever had. But to be considered the best team, some people call it ring culture. Call it what you will. We need results if we're really going to have a conversation about the greatest. So if this is going to be the greatest U.S. team ever, like some people are saying, I think we got to see them in the round of 16. Take your thoughts. 719 24-7, 13-13. The U.S. gets a 2-0 win over Australia. They can clinch the group tonight if Paraguay either beats or ties Turkey. That match is a little bit later. Scotland getting ready for their second match, and then the one after that this evening will be switchbacks centric with Garvin Matusla and Duke Lacroix did not come into the match against Scotland. Haiti was chasing a goal for most of the match, so I'm not surprised that Duke and Garv did not get into the match. We'll see if that happens tonight, but they're going against Brazil. So that'll be a primetime tilt for sure. And then the late match, 8:30 tonight, will be one that you might have your eye on if you're a U.S. fan, and that is Turkey and Paraguay. We'll take a break. Again, 719-24-7-1313, or drop a comment on the live stream. Your thoughts on the U.S.'s 2-0 win over Australia in the group stage of the World Cup. More Drive Time Sports right after this. Welcome in. Great to have you. Whether you're listening to the show, several ways for you to do that. I would highly recommend either the Extra Sports 1300 or 740 KVOR apps, which are free to download and free to use. Or you could watch the show live. Shouts to those of you who are. Anywhere you scroll, you can follow at Extra Sports 1300, at 740 KVOR. You can follow me. The Gram has been kind of where I live most of my social media life, at Ginge Watch, if you'd like to follow me there. The topic of conversation, the U.S. does it again. A 2-0 win over Australia. They have advanced to the knockout round, regardless of what happens against Turkey next week. The question just becomes whether they are going to win the group or not. Paraguay can help them out with a result tonight. If they don't, then it looks like Turkey would have to beat the U.S. outright in order to win the group. But the U.S. is through to the knockout round. I think that was the bare minimum that this team should have done. If they would have been grouped, it would have been an absolute disaster for a reportedly golden generation. So it's the first box is checked. You're not getting grouped. You're through to the knockout round. Now it's advance past that. Win a knockout round match. And the path as it stands, as Morocco has scored in the first 2 minutes of their match against Scotland, Morocco up 1-0 on Scotland in Group C. The path right now for the U.S. would be Bosnia-Herzegovina in the round of 32. And then it would be the winner of Czechia and New Zealand in the round of 16. No Mbappe, no Holland, no Messi. It would be a very good path for the U.S. to get further than it ever has, or in our lifetimes anyway. If they do not win their group, Lionel Messi and Argentina are waiting in the round of 16, as it stands right now. So still a lot to play for in that third match against Turkey, unless Paraguay wins. And then it's a tune-up match for the group stage. And we'll get to this also, too. If the U.S. wins the group tonight, do we see Christian Pulisic next week? Does this give license to Pochettino to give Pulisic another week off? We'll get into that conversation, as he was out today with that. They're saying it's a bruise, but I don't know that I'm buying it. And there's a historical comparison when it comes to U.S. soccer maybe underplaying the injury of one of its stars. But for the time being, let's recap a great afternoon in Seattle for the U.S. men's national team. Australia got a couple of looks early. Matt Freese was called upon early in the match to make a save. It wasn't a difficult save by any stretch, but he was called upon on the near post, was able to make the stop. And then, much like they did against Paraguay, the U.S. just locked in. And from then on out, they absolutely controlled the first 45 minutes, as they did against Paraguay. And that pressure led to Australia putting it into the back of their net in the 11th minute.
Balogun, it's a step on Shirkani. Balogun to the byline. Balogun into the middle. Dead! It's the United States once again on the board early. Ricardo Pepi was in. Was it perhaps last off the defender? Who cares? It's 1-0 U.S.
John Strong with the call for Fox Sports. Exactly the sentiment. Who cares? Pepe in for getting Christian Pulisic's spot in the starting 11, but it was Balogun out on the left-hand side where we saw Pulisic against Paraguay looked at times just as dangerous and certainly did there to force the own goal. You give the U.S. credit for the pressure they put Australia under, and there was nowhere for that center back to go but to put it into the back of his own net. He didn't mean to, but he had nothing else was going to come of that. The U.S. Got the lead, and then they had to kind of manufacture another goal in the 43rd minute. It was Alex Freeman getting the goal, and here's how it sounded courtesy of Fox.
Robinson fizzing it back. Serginho Dest blocked. Still in. Might be two. Is two. Or maybe not. The flag comes up for offside. Freeman thought he was celebrating a World Cup goal.
Well, anticlimactic, but VAR, the unlikeliest of heroes, VAR to the rescue. Clearly, Freeman was onside because of a defender that was further down the line. It was a clean goal, a brilliant goal by Alex Freeman, and that would make it 2-0. And then in the second half, it was just about surviving. Australia came out, I thought, leaning into the one advantage that I think most people thought they would have, and that's their physicality. I thought some of the lineup decisions by the Australian manager sacrificed the ability to score goals to perhaps soften up the U.S., to maybe beat them up a little bit in the first 45 minutes, exert their physical dominance, and then in the second half, bring in more attacking talent to try and break down a worn-out U.S. team. That plan backfired because the U.S. completely controlled the first 45 minutes with a couple of Australia's better goal-scoring options on the bench. That change was made at the half, and you certainly saw, and Australian fans are going to lament this, if they would have come out with truly their best 11, how could things have changed for them? That's what they'll lament. That's what they'll be talking about for the next week, but that's none of our concern. But Australia looked much better in the second half. The desperation level certainly went up. And the U.S. was at times scrambling around. They absolutely were. The biggest questions that I had about this team was defensively, keeping teams off the score sheet. And Australia, with the lineup changes, with the desperation, with some heavy legs from the U.S., was able to look very dangerous. It got very chaotic at times in the second half, but the U.S. did just enough to keep Australia from even getting a shot on goal. They had the one shot early, as I mentioned. They got one in the entire second half. As out of sorts as they looked, as dangerous as Australia looked, only one shot on goal in the entire second half. And you have to give credit to Australia for putting the U.S. under pressure, but the U.S. was able to find a way, their first clean sheet since September. It wasn't pretty in the second half, but that 0 on Australia's half of the scoreboard looks beautiful. And now the U.S. can, I think the best thing for coaches, even in wins, is to have something clearly that they can coach. And I think how much the U.S. was scrambling defensively, Pochettino is going to be able to harp on that in training over the next few days and talk to his team about how more buttoned up defensively they're going to need to be if they're going to achieve the ultimate, what they hope that they're going to get out of this tournament. But again, for a team that hadn't shut anybody out since September, you take it. You absolutely take it. But it was the first 45, and that second goal by Alex Freeman that was so massive for this team to have a bit of a cushion when inevitably Australia came at them with everything they had in the second half. In the U.S. would hang on for the 2-0 win. And again, if Paraguay is able to take points from Turkey tonight, the U.S. will clinch the group, which means Bosnia and then either New Zealand or Czechia before things get ramped up a bit. And you're talking, probably one of the 5 best players in the world that you're going to be going up against when it gets to the quarterfinals. But a massive win for the U.S. I thought Alex Freeman was the best player on the U.S. team. Not just because he had a huge goal, which he did, but the way he defended, I thought was huge and sent a bit of a message right at the end of the first half. Racing with an Australian player towards the end line. Australia was trying to get one last ditch attempt to get a shot off before the end of the half, and Freeman just put his shoulder into the guy and knocked him clear off the ball. And the U.S. bench went berserk because that was the U.S. pushing back and a perfect punctuation to the first 45 minutes of play. This U.S. team is different. You could just feel it. I don't have to throw out numbers or anything like that. You could just feel that the U.S. team is different. Their confidence, their swagger, and how they won't be pushed around. They have shown that through the first 2 matches. And it's going to perpetuate the conversation of whether this is going to ultimately end up being the best U.S. men's national team we've ever seen. Still a long way to go. Bigger foes to vanquish than Australia, but that old saying goes, you play who's in front of you. U.S. had Paraguay, they had Australia. Not among the favorites, to be sure, but I thought, for what? 2 hours? 2.5 hours out of 3 hours, the U.S. has been clearly better than their opponent. Clearly better. Those remaining 30 minutes are, depending on the opponent, maybe a little bit more tilted to the opponent or maybe even. But this U.S. team keeping the belief pretty high right now. Take your thoughts on it. 719-247-1313. You could call or text into the show. If you are watching the show on our live stream, anywhere you scroll, you could just drop a comment right there. The big news of the day before the U.S. actually took the field was that they would be without Christian Pulisic. What did Pochettino do in his absence, and just how serious is this injury truly to the U.S.'s best player? That's next on 740 KVOR and Extra Sports 1300. Congratulations, by the way, to Josh, who won the latest 4-pack of tickets to see Tim McGraw and Chris Jansen at PBR Space Cowboys tomorrow night at Falcon Stadium. And I know what you're thinking. You're a little bit jealous of Josh. Don't be. I mean, Josh has a lot going for him. But so do you. If you win tickets from me right now, last 4-pack of tickets I'm going to give away for tomorrow night's event. Elite Team Bull Riding plus the concert from the 2 country superstars I just mentioned. Be the 13th texter to text Cowboys and your name to 719-247-1313. Morocco has taken a very early 1-0 lead over Scotland. That group C, one of the more interesting groups in this tournament. Later tonight, it will be Brazil against Haiti. Switchbacks, defenders, Duke LaCroix and Garvin Matusla, obviously members of Haiti, did not see any playing time against Scotland in the 1-0 loss. We'll see if they play tonight against Casemiro and that whole group there for Brazil. And then the nightcap is the one that you care most about if you're a U.S. fan, because if Paraguay either beats or ties Turkey, the U.S. will clinch the group stage. And that match against Turkey will be merely a tune-up for the knockout round. So still lots of soccer to be played today. Let's see. This text coming in from the 719. First 2-0 start since 1930. Got to be better, not turning ball over in defensive end. Better teams will punish us. We will see more games where other teams control possession, which we need to stay composed. Couldn't ask for a better start to the World Cup. So freaking pumped. Go USA. Yeah, like, I get, American exceptionalism when it comes to our sports, right? We're never satisfied. We're always having the highest bar set. If there is one, whether it's our domestic competitions or just us on the world stage, or even us in soccer on the women's side, I know that it's, we don't, maybe it's a flaw of ours that we don't enjoy. We just don't enjoy because we got to win everything. I would say the U.S. men's national team is one exception to the rule where we can go, you know what? Let's just enjoy it. Let's just enjoy the best start, to the texter's point, since 1930. Let's enjoy the fact that the U.S. had a clean sheet today, that the U.S. has overwhelmed their 2 opponents in the first 45 minutes of each of these matches. We know it will get tougher. We know it will. But where it looks like it's going to get tougher is at a point that we've never seen the U.S. men's national team go. Like, that's the reality of the situation. They win this group. Not to dismiss Bosnia, not to dismiss New Zealand or Czechia. Because Czechia, if you saw Australia and you're like, I may not want to see another team like that. Czechia is a team like that. So it's not to say that the U.S. will have an easy borderline cakewalk into the quarterfinals here. But the U.S. should be able to win both of those matches, especially with everything we've seen so far. So, yes, you look way forward or you watch some more soccer tonight and in the coming days, and you see Harry Kane back on the field and Erling Haaland and Lionel Messi, and I get it. You're like, oh, like U.S., this is good U.S. team. I don't know if they're that good. Let's get there. Let's get there. This is the one team wearing the red, white, and blue where we can just enjoy the ride more than we can with other teams. Things to fix, things to tighten up, absolutely. But this is why you win the group. This is why you come out and play the way the U.S. has. So you have time to continue to build and improve and maybe get your star player back. What makes today all the more impressive and why you should enjoy the moment even more is that Christian Pulisic did not play today. This bruised calf, or is that, I think that's what they're calling it, is a bruised calf, kept him out of today's game. He had not practiced with the team all week. And we found out, 11 o'clock, 11:30 Mountain Time today that he would not be playing. Pepe came in his spot, but Pochettino moved Balogun out to the left, and Balogun being out there directly led to the own goal Australia scored. I don't think they missed Christian Pulisic that much today. And that's not an indictment on him. The best version of this U.S. team is with him on the field. There's no doubt about that. But I heard Mauricio Pochettino talking to Jenny Taft after the game on Fox, and it's something that we have brought up a lot lately. You got to have depth. You have to have depth in order to advance deep in any postseason. Right? We just got done with the NBA Finals and the Stanley Cup Final, and the two teams that won had depth and was able to show that. And how many teams were we sure were going to go far, get derailed by an injury? The U.S. can't. You only get this shot. I know 1994, so we'll wait another 32 years when I'm retired, and maybe the U.S. will get another. None of these guys will play on home soil ever again. So as much as, long-term injury for Christian Pulisic would be detrimental for the U.S., the guys that are still playing, it's like this is their only shot. They can't let it go by just because he's out. And Pochettino saying that, in order to win this tournament, it takes everybody. And it's such a cliche, but it is so true. Because if you don't get everybody, that's where you see these teams that we've seen in the Stanley Cup playoff. And just look at the Avalanche, right? Cale Makar gets hurt, and it completely ruins the Colorado Avalanche. So much so that they get swept out of the playoffs. Like it short-circuited their entire team. And the teams that can find a way, even if it's their best player, to be able to win, it bodes well for them. So a lot of credit to the U.S. for putting together a performance like they did today, despite not having their best player. Now, if you win the group, do you even think about playing him next game? Pochettino said he hoped that he would have him back. That's going to be a conversation all next week. If the U.S. does not need to get a result against Turkey to win the group, do they decide to hold him out again? Now, I think if this was a knockout round match, Christian Pulisic would have played. That's my belief. However, we went through this before, right? Remember 2 World Cups ago, not 2 World Cups that the U.S. played ago, to be more specific. Josie Altidore. We were told he was day-to-day. right? Well, maybe this game, it might be this game, and then we find out at the end of it that his hamstring was basically ripped off a bone. Like, he was in terrible shape, and he was in no shape to play at all, and the U.S. knew that. But they don't have to accurately report their injuries. It's like hockey in that way. Like, we find out upper body injury, and that's all we get, and then we realize that somebody like fractured their spine or something. So I'm not saying that it's the same situation here. I'm just saying I've seen this movie before where the U.S. is like, it's day to day, maybe tomorrow, maybe tomorrow, maybe tomorrow. And then you find out at the end of the tournament, yeah, he was never going to play. Let's hope that's not the case. And again, I'm not saying it is. But clearly the injury is worse than a bruised calf makes it sound. I think we could say that. And he can still be ready for Turkey next week or still be ready for the knockout round. But it's clearly a worse injury than they're letting on. Given how important this World Cup is to America in general, but for Christian Pulisic individually, with his legacy and what this could mean if he were to lead the U.S. to heights they've never achieved before, he would have probably tried to give it a go if the U.S. would have been sent packing if they would have lost this match. So that's what you feel good about, right? Is that time is on the U.S.'s side, and they bought more time today with this 2-0 win. And they might even have an argument, maybe he plays a few minutes as a second half sub against Turkey if the U.S. doesn't need it to win the group. But you'd rather Christian Pulisic get hurt now than get hurt on the eve of a quarterfinal matchup. But Mauricio Pochettino, after the match, said he hopes that Christian Pulisic can play against Turkey, but he was hoping that he could play against Australia. And he couldn't. So that will be, again, the big story next week, too, is his availability. But the U.S. proved not that they don't need him necessarily, but they have enough depth, they have enough talent that they can survive. At this point in the tournament, they can survive without Christian Pulisic. If they're going to win this whole thing, they absolutely have to have him. 719-24-7. 13-13, your thoughts on the U.S.'s 2-0 win over Australia. They're 2-0 in the group stage. First time since 1930 they have won back-to-back World Cup matches to begin a tournament. The vibes are high. Vibes are immaculate right now. Back after this. Congratulations to Roger. Picked up our last 4-pack of tickets to see Tim McGraw, Chris Jansen, and Elite Team bull riding at Falcon Stadium tomorrow night for PBR Space Cowboys, sponsored by U.S. Space Force, presented by the U.S. Space Force. U.S. gets a 2-0 win over Australia. They are through to the knockout round. Now will they win the group? Paraguay can help them with a win or a tie tonight against Turkey. That match is at 8:30 if you are interested. And then Turkey is the team that the U.S. will be playing next. And what may be on the line for that one could be wildly different. So we'll see how the match between Turkey and Paraguay goes tonight. And when we reconvene next week, we'll go through the machinations and see what's at stake for the U.S. But they're getting it done. No excuses with this team. Not right now. No Christian Pulisic. Still dominate the first 45 and get a 2-0 win. Balogun. That dude is special. There's a story developing right now at Shinnecock Hills. Colorado's own Wyndham Clark has set a 36-hole record at that course. And if you know anything about Shinnecock, I mean, somebody has to set the course record. I get that. That is a beast of a course. Absolute beast of a course. And Wyndham Clark has tamed that beast through 2 rounds, setting a record. Rory struggling. I mean, going into the tournament, it's typical U.S. Open. Right? And it's not my favorite thing, and this is always the debate. I like to see, I know that I can't do what any of these guys do. I realize that. The scores that they would put up at Shinnecock, I would not be able to put up. I understand this, but I don't want my golfers that I'm watching on TV to be on the same side of par as I am. Right? I want players to be able to go low and put up, so to show off how good they are. I don't love that the U.S. Open does the stuff that they do. But it's a typical U.S. Open. The idea was if you're under par, you're great. You're in great shape. Wyndham Clark was like, I'll do you one better. I'll set the course record at this place. Nicely done. Halfway home, Wyndham Clark to another major title. What else going on this Friday? So the NHL, with this Mike Babcock thing, they have decided that, their statement basically read, like, we know this guy is a jerk and a bully, but he hasn't done anything that can keep him from being employed. That's not what they said, but that's how I interpreted their statement. They will not stand in the way of the Edmonton Oilers hiring him. And the Oilers are expected to go ahead and do that, at least work towards that, and make him their next head coach. And the dynamic with him, you have to understand, he is a bully, but he could be the best friend of the star player. So if you're Edmonton and you're in a dire situation, let's be clear about it. You got called on the carpet by both Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid. You have to placate them. Your two stars, one of which is the best player in the league and could be leaving Edmonton at some point in the very near future. They absolutely talk to those guys. But I understand why Connor McDavid. I mean, Mike Babcock, for all of his faults, is a brilliant tactician. He's a great hockey mind. And he gets along great with his star players. But we just talked about the U.S. men's national team, how important depth is to their success. Depth was to their success today with no Christian Pulisic. You have got to make decisions, not just for your star players sometimes. And the thought Daniel Winnick, who once upon a time played for the Avalanche, talked about Mike Babcock being the only guy that has made him hate hockey. McDavid might get along great with him, Leon Draisaitl, maybe even Evan Bouchard. Although the way that the Oilers defend the blue line, I don't know that Mike Babcock's going to like it. But with the star players, that's great. But you got a big old roster with a lot of players. And if depth didn't matter, then Edmonton would have multiple Stanley Cups by now. Because in most series, save for maybe against the Colorado Avalanche, they have the two best players on the ice. And yet, no cups. So it's a gamble. I don't even think coaching was their problem. I think it's the general manager that's their issue. But what do general managers do to take the heat off of them? Fire the coach. So, good luck, Edmonton. I want to see Edmonton be successful. I want Connor McDavid. Connor McDavid's a great player that deserves to have a Stanley Cup. Absolutely. I just don't know that this is the way to go about it. What else? Yamin Yamal, still not 90 minutes fit for Spain, which could be an issue. Saw Spain in the story for the Cape Verde goalkeeper making 7 saves. So Spain was plenty dangerous, but they had nothing to show for it. And now their young phenom, who people are saying is the next Messi, not yet 90 minutes fit for a Spain team that needs a win. But how about the U.S.? That's what we mostly care about. 2-0. The path right now looks very good. Bosnia-Herzegovina and then the winner of Czechia and New Zealand would be their next 2 matches outside of the group stage. Obviously, they have Turkey first. And then it's to the heavy hitters. Who that might be. Let's see if I can see who it would be. Scrolling on the phone is not the best way to look through a bracket. So as it stands right now, let's see where the U.S. would eventually end up. So be the top part of this bracket. I mean, they would even get... Yeah, they would even get Uruguay, Austria, Ghana, or the Democratic Republic of the Congo. In the quarterfinals. But then it would be the teams that would be next. Germany, Brazil, Norway, that's Holland. The Netherlands, Sweden, who looked pretty impressive in their first match. But that's not till it's not for a while. Point is, winning the group for the U.S. would be massive. That's the point I'm getting at here. And Paraguay can help them out tonight. If not, they would need a result against Turkey next week. But great performance today by the U.S. I'll get more into my thoughts on that coming up here in just a little bit. Your thoughts welcome as well. 719-247-1313. I'm seeing some rumblings here with the Denver Nuggets. We're getting closer to the start of free agency, and rumors abound right now. And one that I saw, or one trade that someone mocked, was one that I just had last week on this show. I think it was last week, maybe even earlier this week. How about Christian Brown for Klay Thompson? Doesn't get you that excited, does it? These are the kind of moves, though, that I'm expecting the Denver Nuggets to make. Give it a different look, a different feel while cutting payroll. That's what I think the goal of this offseason will be. And then for the Avalanche, saw an interesting one. Jacob DeBrusk, I think this was Greg Wyszynski for I think he writes for The Athletic. Jacob DeBrusk going to the Avs, Valeri Nichushkin going to Washington, and then picks from both of the teams going to Vancouver. I don't know that I would do that deal. Essentially giving up Nichushkin for DeBrusk. I wouldn't understand that. But the Avs don't. I think Nichushkin's going to be certainly one of the guys on the Avs that is going to be in a lot of rumors. You know, they stuck with him through the issues that he had, and good on him for that. He came back, was impactful, but now we're looking at he was not much of a factor in these playoffs. I think it's him, and it's Nelson, and it's Natchez. I think those are the three guys that you look at, and not saying that you want to just give away any of them. That's not what I'm saying. You don't just, none of these guys do you just dump for nothing. But those are the three guys that you're kind of looking at and like, can the Avs do better there or get something else out of that? That's not it. Jacob DeBrusk for Valeri Nichushkin, no thank you. So try again. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, my thoughts on the U.S.'s big 2-0 win over Australia, getting through to the knockout round, and now we just wait and see whether they are going to be winners of their group or not. Paraguay and Turkey tonight. If Paraguay gets a result, the U.S. will clinch the group. Right now, though, I was mentioning Wyndham Clark. Let's get an update from the U.S. Open, courtesy of Westwood One.
Westwood One Sports presents this special report on the 126th U.S. Open Championship, sponsored by Private Gym. Private Gym, made for your brain. For the last